Hey there YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Just going to do a quick little overview this morning. Trying to think of what, I suppose the hardest thing for me, or the hardest thing I seem to find when I'm creating content, is finding out think of what to record. Think about this morning, trying to think of what I was going to put up for you guys today. Obviously I don't want just another, hey, I'm doing another channel, hey, here's an update, just generic crap. I actually want to start giving you guys a bit of education, a bit more of an insight, which is the whole point of this, a bit more of an insight into the behind the scenes of what I do in terms of my photography and drifting and stuff like that. So I suppose the best place to start, which I thought this morning was from the beginning, start with the basics, start with basically ground up, as if I was taking someone through this face-to-face, which I kind of am, taking them through what I do day to day for my photography, what I do, how I prepare for a shoot, what I use, how I shoot, my thinking when I'm at the event, what I'm looking for, stuff like that. So I suppose the first thing to start with, the gear. Now I'm actually going to do another little video and do a bunch of little shorts on tips and tricks of gear and stuff like that, because yes, I do shoot with some big stuff, but you don't need to. I'm going to run through some of my more basic cameras I've got and actually do some. I'm actually going to take some of my really cheap cameras out to the track and do some photos with it, and just show that you don't need big expensive equipment to be able to start in photography and be able to start in drift photography. You can start with anything. I have cameras here that you can pick them up off eBay, you can pick them up off Facebook Marketplace and stuff for $100, $150 with a basic lens. You might not be able to get telephoto, stuff like that, but things like static pit shots of cars actually in the pit, stuff like that. Just typical kind of car shots, car shows, that sort of stuff. You can start with a camera that's going to cost you $150. You can pick up a 50mm lens off eBay for $100. And you can start shooting and get some really, really good high quality photos if you know how to use it. And that's the big thing. It doesn't matter what sort of equipment you've got. If you don't know how to use it, you're not going to get the results. But anyway, I digress. So just to give you a quick rundown of the main equipment I use. So this setup is the main setup I use for pretty much vast majority of my track shots when I'm doing events. I do have some small lens I do when I'm going behind the scenes. The beauty with this lens, it is a 70-200 f2.8. We can see there, 70-200mm, f2.8. It's not image stabilized. There is an image stabilized version of this. I never end up getting it. I actually got this as the image stabilized version was coming out, so it was still on the higher end of the budget. I much prefer to go with this sort of stuff. I've put a lot of practice in over the time of being able to shoot freehand and not actually need the image stabilization, so didn't really see the point of it. But the f2. The 70-200 does allow me to zoom right out. 7mm is still fairly wide, or fairly close for pit shots and stuff like that. I do tend to have to be a fair bit away from the subject, but I'll work around it. I work on like detail shots, stuff like that, just to allow me to use it a little bit more as a walk around. Not really what you generally call a walk around lens. I do have my 24-70. That matches up with this, which is what I use for my general walk around stuff, or I've got a 50mm lens that I pop on here, a little prime lens. The body itself is a Canon EOS 5D Mark II. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to be surprised about it if you know anything about Canons, about cameras. This is a very, very old body. I think I've had this camera for, crikey, 14, 15 years. It is specifically a portrait camera. The 5D Mark II and the 1DS, or the 1D, were the two sort of main professional bodies at the time when I got this. These days there is 1,000 different camera bodies you can get. The 5D2 was more of a portrait type photography. The 1D was the sports version. So the 5D has a much slower shutter speed in terms of burst mode. The 1DS had very, very fast compared to this, so it was designed for the sport. Catch a lot of photos in a short amount of time. So I do miss a few things with this when I'm shooting, but it's all about knowing your subject. I will expand a lot more on these topics as well. I'm going to kind of brush over a few little things just because I keep these videos, try and keep them nice and short. It's all about knowing your subject and knowing what you're shooting. I know drifting, I know racing, so I can kind of almost preempt where the shot's going to be, so I know when I need to shoot, as opposed to just smashing out 1,000 photos and going back and picking 1 out of 50. In saying that, I do generally get a lot of photos anyway, just because you don't know what's going to happen in drifting. Might be able to predict where a decent photo is going to be, but you never know what's going to happen. All sorts of stuff can happen, especially on wet pans where people hit a bit of an extra wet patch and it just zips off to the side. You find a wall somehow, you tag it, whatever. But this has been my go-to. When I bought this, I was actually doing majoritively portrait photography, which is why I went for this version. It was significantly cheaper as well at the time. I have progressed a lot more into the sports photography these days, so I'm shooting a lot more of that. But as I said, it's all about knowing the equipment, knowing the subject, what you're shooting, and knowing how to get the best out of both. This little combination has been an absolute workhorse for me. I would hate to think how many photos I've put through both of these. It would be in the tens, well and truly well over the tens of thousands, considering a full-day event for me. I'll usually come home with 3,500 to 4,000, if not more, photos from an event, and that's just from one day, and I've been shooting this thing for 15 years. So you can imagine what the shutter count would be on this, how many photos this has been through and what it's been through. They're both weatherproof, so they will take a fair bit of punishment in terms of rain and dust and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm going to be changing lenses when it's raining or in the wet, but I can handle a little bit of rain, a little bit of dust as well, so I can kind of get away with pretty much any extreme conditions. But yeah, that's my main little go-to. I will go into a little bit more detail about each of them, show you a few of the settings, what I normally use on the back, how I set my camera up, and then obviously go into a little bit more explanation. I want to do a few videos about the quality of the equipment you're using, as opposed to the skill you're putting into the equipment. You can put any old driver into an F1 car. Just because they know how to drive a car doesn't mean they're going to be able to get the most out of that car. They're not going to be setting lap records. As opposed to you put an F1 driver into a family car, they're probably going to drive it a hell of a lot quicker than you will. It's all about knowing the equipment, knowing how to get the most out of it. So yes, I do shoot with this, but as I said, I'm going to do some videos of some basic stuff that I've done before, and even take some of my basic equipment out to the track, get a couple of photos just to show you what is possible. Because you don't need this. That's one thing I hear when I talk to new photographers when they get in the tracks, like, I only bought what I could afford. Couldn't afford anything big at the time. I'm looking to upgrade, and it's like the photos you're putting down are fine. Like, you just a few little tweaks here and there. Knowing how to bend the light, knowing how to use the light to your advantage, knowing how to edit even afterwards can get a big difference out of your photos. Equipment isn't everything. Yes, you do get some advantage from it, and you can do some cool stuff with it. But if you know how to use the equipment you've got, you're going to get just as good photos. So that's a quick little overview of what I use. But yeah, I'm going to do a little series of these about the equipment I'm using and little tips and tricks to help people out and get you started. Hope you enjoy. Talk to you soon.